Crickets smothered by snowbergs. We're just going to push this to the bitter end, aren't we? Crickets smothered. That's why I got snowbergs around here. They're cousins to icebergs. 99% of them floats on the surface. These outcroppings of ice piled everywhere, still. And I'm sure all the crickets are hiding underneath that, just so they won't get up and do something. And the evidence is all around us. Why won't we do something? Why won't we find out it's the proper thing to do? Why do we fight amongst ourselves about all the improper things to do? It's been really a marvel to me. Just came across a statement the other day. Educate and inform the whole mass of the people. Folks, are you listening? You got to listen here. I mean, really listen to this stuff. Educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty, as stated by Thomas Jefferson. Educate and inform the whole mass of the people is what I'm trying to do behind Woodshed. And I keep telling you, it's not about knowledge, how much you know. It's about what you properly do with what you know. In the second part of this sentence, and it was a longer statement, you can find the quote, it says, they are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. It's not the educator, it's not the teacher, it's not the wayfarer, as I spread my virus to you, infecting the whole of society. It's that you have to preserve the liberty that you seek. Again and over again. It's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know on an object of your intention. They are the only sure reliance. That's you, folks. You can't be crickets smothered by snowbergs. For those of you on Pastcast or Prodcast, this is BTWRLM199. Now, we've been in face of a whole lot of things. The truths are coming that what we're looking at is not a truth. What we're told, in the most part, is not a truth. At least the active part of, well, I can't even say that, can I? Because the history, his story is written by a victor who wants to contort even the past. And this starts to show us the quagmire we will be entering into. That requires us to be very diligent and vigilant on being able to learn and discern what is up. And if we don't, if we get lost in all the noise, well, it's the sea of noise, and you get lost, you get put away, and just kind of set any course. Doesn't really matter. That's exactly what they want. Why was Thomas Jefferson even talking about it? The point of the preservation of liberty, if it wasn't the concept that it will always be under attack and be lost unless it is to the whole of a educated people. And I'm not talking about the legal term of people or the whole people. See, this is the whole mass of the people, and they speak in a different way back before the wordsmiths got a hold of everything. And so they come up with a bunch of stuff, and they give it titles, and you give it title, and then you own it. And then if you're really sharp about things, and the internet has allowed us to do these sorts of deals, if we are integrated with it, we never seem to really follow through. And it seems to be more of a, well, I don't even know what the word is on this. You see a vulnerability in somebody or something, and you attack them in the vulnerability until it's not fun anymore, and then you move on. But these vulnerabilities are the notice to us of the glitch. that we have to call out and not let die and hold foremost in our minds, and tie them with the other glitches and hold those foremost in our minds about putting the categories and possibilities I tell you to create for yourselves on the reality that you may find yourself. And I don't get so esoteric to believe that we're not in a reality and there's not a way this thing works, whether or not I understand it. I understand that from notices to me, prior discussions, there's people that know this reality better than I do, and I'm in it. Now I've got a problem. And yet if we're questioning about liberty and the preservation of it, the statement's pretty profound when you think about it. There was an anticipation liberty was lost, or would be lost. And the only way to get it back is to talk to all y'all. Now, I just came across that. I'm not really well read, in lots of ways. I'm fairly illiterate in some regards. And then, as I told you, I lost my memory, so that's all that got washed away. And so my focus really has been, when my memory got cleared and cleaned, if you will, it was put in a fog, and I decided after a while fighting, trying to see through the fog, I decided that wasn't the best way to spend my energy. I would just create a new memory. And it just so happened about the same time, and maybe why this all came on, I came to what I know now to tell you, because I was able to focus on all that. So you have a name, you give something, you control it. There's a way to wrest that from people, and the way I've been finding that done is you have to go to an objective basis, and the objective basis is what we know as the law, even if you want to call it legal. See, I'm not afraid of all that stuff, and I'm not afraid to jump into it. Like a lot of people want to distance themselves. I've shown you, as we discuss all this, you can go ahead. If you understand the battlefield, you can jump on the battlefield, and you can take the battlefield. And so this is what started to happen with this thing called fake news. I told you all not to get into, but to identify it and call it out. Eventually, what it was would be open to all to see. And a couple weeks back came the news, and I can only get through so many tabs in my attempt every week, that this came up to show you that this is exactly what's happening, and the sort of power that people have if we can keep focused on it. And not that we focus on this. This is a hit and run issue. They brought out this thing called fake news. And the one wielding the sword had it taken from them in such a way that it was almost immediate, that they already started to put out the idea that maybe it's time to retire the tainted term fake news. And I wanted to just point this out, is it's not focusing on the fake news, it's the dynamic that went on. The people that were in the process of trying to explain to the people that have been in the process of misinforming everybody, not on everything. I told you, it's just notice to me. I just look and see what they're saying, and then I try to look at what is really going on around it. That all of a sudden the Washington Post comes out with a story by some author, and they cry uncle, because people took this term as it was used as a weapon against them, and were able to expose that the people who used the term were the people that perpetuate it, no different and in the same model and plan as the United States, claiming a war on terror, is actually perpetrating a war of terror against the world. It's the same method over and over, and the way you stop it is you jump on it and call it out, and don't get all changing and diffused about what we're looking at. And so here's the first evidence that how fast this thing really works out. Fake news is a real thing, as evidenced by these wholly invented stories created in Macedonia with the intent of fooling the United States audiences. So here the story opens up with an admission that it happens, folks. So all this stuff that we look at, really have to now put a big question mark in your mind, I would hope. We don't know what is true. This is the notice. It's going to take even more. integrated intelligence on all this in order to work it out. And that's just getting the information. That's not working that into a plan of action. And this article goes on to say, but this phrase is now being used as a catch-all insult and has lost its meaning. Well, this is now the propaganda as well within this article. It hasn't lost its meaning. But the one who started to use it, the media, the government-guided media, the mouthpiece of government that will sell you their war of terror as a war on terror, is trying to tell you that the term is useless, it lost its meaning when in fact it hasn't. And it needs to be maintained not as the term, although it's now easy to use that term. In fact, where I was telling you that you don't get lost in the term. You can use it if you call it out. We're actually using the term to expose governmental wrongs as fake news. And it's very interesting, the people that are understanding this, that are not into what those of us behind the woodshed might understand, they get that. And so we took a weapon, and now we're using it against the ones that created it, to expose they're the ones that created the weapon and was using it. In other words, they are the criminal. They that invented this thing to try and make an insult of it to anybody who wasn't the in crowd, the cool kids, with respect to what they call media. And I don't know, media is a pretty generic term anyway. So I wanted to call this out. This was a quick turnaround, and it's not over yet. But don't buy into the fake news other than to see what it is and then call it out for what it is. And it will be, again, not something that can be used against many people at all. And now we can use it against the one that invented it and tried to wield it as a weapon. John Rappaport was also in the mix on that. And reporters tell me the truth off the record, the fake news business. And he goes through and explains from long years ago, people he would talk to in private that were in the business. And again, I could read this off. I guess if you want me to read to you, I don't know. No one's ever said anything. Don't tell me much. You guys don't tell me much, actually. I keep going through this. That you don't tell me that you want me to read to you, and I guess that would be kind of an embarrassment anyway, wouldn't it? Because you should be able to read for yourself. But I guess maybe lots of people like to be entertained, and I don't know about that. I'm not here to entertain, and I really don't do that good a job anyway. He goes through a list of things he was told, and I think John's been pretty upstanding all the time, that I think I can take his words for truth. And you need to read his article. You get it in the Blogcaster, or you can go to his website and pick it up. And it details the people that are in this so-called media, these organizations that called out fake news as everyone else doing it, is actually very, very controlled and censored internally, and it is partly, there's also many reasons here. It is a profit-making adventure. There isn't the investments that go on that used to for investigations, and there is a lot easier way to get information when you're just told and rewrite it, or just retell it. And that benefactor happens to be the government with the deep pockets that's supposedly and purportedly working by and for the people. And then you find out today the people means them. The whole people is the legislators. And then everybody is inside on that, taking their part. And that's outside in the executive and the judiciary and all that. So when you see these things come down and they're not changed or fixed, or you see in the back door who's involved in all these things, that you start realizing the connections. You start realizing why we are not being served by the government. That was really, when you look at the framework of the just government, it has a neat setup. It really is unique. And I really do not blame a notional structure called government. It's not inert. It's not abstract. The harm that's hitting you is done by people, by men and women who take advantage of that. Then they put it on us, which is maybe not so right. They put on us based on our use of them to bring accountability. And how long did that last was really the joke on us that we also didn't fix or stop or insist on. So fake news, fake media, John Rappaport puts on his history as being a journalist, of talking with other journalists inside the media of what was really going on. Years and years ago, he says between 1982 and 2011, his very first quote was from one journalist, was investigative reporting has been dying. So way back since 82 or so, this process of degradation in so-called journalism, if it had a place before that was independent, was the extra eyeballs watchdog on everything, like it seemed to be way back in the late 1800s, and not so purely, but it did seem to be a little bit more independent. That had been dying as early as 1980 or so. So we can continue to focus on this. This is a dying beast, except it's a weapon. And so we have proof all the time now of what it is. And I say you take these parts and pieces together to build the better facts for you, that you don't get in arguments over people. You just defer or refer to these facts and evidence. And until those can be shown or rebutted, or shown to be wrong or rebutted as to being fraudulent, you're better just to hold to those and move on than to get into arguments with people over anything, actually. And this is why I say I don't talk about questions. I don't talk much about opinion. Right now, to me, over the years, it has been, what can I find in fact? That's why I went to what I call, what it is, the objective basis of society. Everyone in society working by the objective basis of what we call law, whether you want to characterize it as legal or law or whatever you want a title you want to put on it. There is a common agreement amongst everybody in a society, at least one that's identifiable. And that's what we call the law. That's been put there for the most part over time because that's what makes things work. Otherwise, we go back to going at each other's throats. So fake news is not a not thing. It's a weapon. It was caught. It was taken away from the criminal, and it was being held at their throat, and they called uncle. John Rappaport says that's been an ongoing process. He gives you a list of things of what people said. You can take them for the truth or not as you want. The point is I see these are witnesses to a resistant public, a resistant people. You'll talk about how it's a joke, but this has real world ramifications that then nobody seems to take on as the tool for themselves to advance something somewhere. Be the one that preserves the liberty. See, when someone's stolen the liberty, that's an oppressor, as I've been suggesting. It takes the mass of people now to throw that off, even though it's only a few people. And I haven't really stopped to analyze that dynamic, but it seems to be it's this taking advantage of structures of systems that we leave to them in the way we set up the governments that we have. So we take in all this information, and we are guided by our decisions of it. And that's why it starts to become a very big question today with the war of terror of the government against us using the media. When does that become a terrorism by the government? And then when you go find out, you'll realize that definition doesn't apply to the government, and that should terrify you. That's what should be terrifying, not what the war that they put on you is. That these people have gotten in, and they've brought this thing called sovereignty, not as underneath the law, but as a necessity to defeat it, by not allowing them, the government, the people in the government who wield this weapon against you, to be accountable. That's why I say when you get into these things in terrorism, these acts that they put under you, the first thing you turn around is you have to say that's a fraud, a mischaracterization, a defamation, and it's really fraud on the court or the system of justice that's imposed, that you are guaranteed as a pretext. This necessity they've talked about is a pretext, and you necessarily flip the burden onto those that are wielding that very powerful tool called necessity. And I say it's very powerful because when you look around in international law, it actually runs the show. And there was never supposed to be this carte blanche approach that we have now, just to hand because someone says there's a necessity that it's good. And none of us have, very few of us have been challenging that point, and even fewer, if any, have anything to say actually. And so this is where I do come in concurrence with people that say, not the reasoning, but the apparent futility. Well, how can you use the system against the system? That's not what we're talking about. We're saying that the system has become the enemy. Now what are you going to do about it? It was up to you to preserve liberty. You, each one of us, each one of you. Thomas Jefferson gave us that idea. This wasn't a passive game. This was not a passive thing. Governments are deadly. And if you wanted to maintain your liberty, you're going to have to know there's someone going to come and take it. And they're going to do it by all kinds of means. And information's one of the biggest weapons against you. And so, in my life, I've always heard about, Nobel Peace Prize. We think it's something noble, not Nobel, but noble. And then we get the truth when the unqualified one was given one. And then next thing you know, he's bombing everybody, killing more people and dropping more bombs on people's heads. He himself says he wasn't worthy. And it continues. That another group has always been, I think it's been all my life. The ones that set the doomsday clock. And so, I'm not going to get too much into that. But there was this headline says, a countdown to disaster, major doomsday clock announcement as mankind faces Armageddon. Global catastrophe could be right around the corner as the scientists behind the terrifying doomsday clock make a huge, huge, huge announcement. These guys they made an impression with the Cold War and the nuclear threat and all of kids getting underneath, at least the videos we were seeing, that the kids all jump underneath their desks and cover their head and throw themselves up against a wall, do body wall slamming. These people made an impression. And it wasn't up until, and I never thought too much more about it. Okay, there's some people that are concerned. And then as we go through time, we learned a thing or two. And now I know that scientists may not be. So that subheading in that title may be telling me something. The scientists behind the terrifying doomsday clock. Well, it's not a clock. It's just it's a prop also. And so we have the big letters, disaster and Armageddon, and major doomsday clock in the title. And all I can see is, wow, these so-called scientists are really pushing DoomAgeddon. They want to tell you that this has always been, almost a few minutes before midnight, when all breaks loose. And we suffer DoomAgeddon. And then they tell you in the story, the doomsday clock is a symbolic timepiece. So it's a prop, folks. And then they said something I hadn't understand up until I saw this story, because I don't pay much more attention to it. But I thought there was, just keeping everybody honest and keeping everybody good faith, thinking that they're all doing their thing. Maybe these scientists were really involved and really interested. And maybe nuclear war is not something we want to enter into, and they want to keep our consciousness in the fact that maybe we stay away from it. They came out this year and they tell us that it represents this symbolic DoomAgeddon clock is a symbolic timepiece that represents a countdown to a catastrophic event occurring, such as nuclear war and life-ending climate change. Now, folks, for the life of me, I never knew, especially way back when, that this doomsday clock was attached to climate change. Because if it was, these so-called scientists were saying back in the 70s we were going to suffer an ice age. And then it changed. And then we found out climate change was another weapon against us. It's fraud. Climate does change, folks. Thing is that the theory is a statistical relationship that denies the sun. That can't be science. It may be Galileo 2.0, but it's not science, at least the way I understood it. That when I saw the terms here, that such as a nuclear war, which I thought it was only solely indicating or symbolic of this perceived danger, but it also includes life-ending climate change. Folks, I don't know where that even is, as a scientist, that they could say life-ending at all. But here it was to show us all these years, giving these people credit, they are the scam artists. So I spent maybe too long on that. But folks, it doesn't matter where you go. People, we're finding out, those that have propped themselves up on the props of persuasion are frauds. And to me, that's a sad thing in a way. Not that I'm going to get all choked up about it, but these are the things that you may not be, for those of you listeners behind the woodshed, or that will come to know what I'm doing behind the woodshed for y'all, educating to motivate the masses to preserve liberty, as it's conceived as being free amongst ourselves, not as it actually is in title, in definition. That people are impressed by this, that will work against being the thinking that liberty has been stolen from them. That these things have been put in our way for decades to persuade us from action, being focused on these things like there's a concern, a body of people that are the watchdogs there. In fact, they are just the setups for the takedown, as I keep saying. And I said, in a way, it's sad to continually find about everything that's been placed for our consumption in this consumer world is fraudulent, harmful to the point of being a weapon, persistent, and we're oblivious to that. So this doomsday clock with these scientists now got me thinking pretty quickly, with the inclusion of climate change. These are just a bunch of adjective scientists. These are lobbyists. Remember, I've done the document reading, and I can do that. I hope you all did. I didn't see many people actually clicking to those documents, but a few of you did, and thank you for informing yourself. I hope you followed through. These so-called sciences and science-based information is actually lobbyist adjective science. It's not actual science. And these people have been giving us the line and the load for decades to get us completely removed from reality at some point. And that I found out I went back pretty quickly when I tied in the climate change to this group that we now know this clock is just a prop. Doesn't mean anything now. It's useless. It's been a scam on us all this time. Environmentalists' wild predictions was a story written way back in 2008 or so, 6 or so. Now that another Earth Day has come and gone, let's look at some environmentalists' predictions that they would prefer we forgot. At the first Earth Day celebration in 1969, interestingly coinciding with the time we set foot on the moon, I believe, and that we got to look back at that Earth that they use so iconically, environmentalist Nigel Calder warned, quote, "The threat of a new ice age must now stand alongside nuclear war as a likely source of the wholesale death and misery for mankind. Doom'ogeddon." So I'll end there. There's a whole lot that is stated in this article you actually need to see. It's a neat list to show how wrong these adjective scientists are, environmental lobbyists, not science at all. How science-based is going to be. It's the title term of destruction. It's the weapon. It's not really science they're foisting on everybody. That they did predict an ice age. But I'll tell you, there's one thing about that. When they did it back then, they were actually showing, and you could see, and remember, there's no internet back when. There's just the newspapers and the libraries. And there's minds coming out of schools that were actually told to go read from the libraries and the base books and do the analysis. And I can't tell you how many times I found myself literally with piles of books on a table doing research, correlating facts, images, and things together to try and come up with what it was you were trying to make a report on, get an idea about, how you were supposed to, come to your conclusions, just what we used to do. In correlation of all this information, that there was a thread, a pretty strong thread, and they predicted that the ice age wasn't happening then, it was happening here in our future even. The window that I was telling you about, the reports were saying, the scientists in recalculating this, looks like they've adjusted it from 2030 out to about 2050 or 60. That led me to believe that all this chemtrail spraying, all this stuff they're putting in the clouds, are allowing to be aerosols in the clouds, even innocently with the jet trails. However that forms up, there's no science reason for that unless there's an aerosol being sprayed into the engine, because a bypass engine in a jet doesn't put that much exhaust through the air that's not mixed with a whole lot more, 85 or 90% more bypass air. But there wouldn't be the ability for it to show a contrail, except for the very rarest occasions, that even allowing these aerosols in the sky, whether or not you want to identify them as a chemtrail, whatever the constituent parts, would reflect enough light if we were moving into this period to accelerate an ice age. And it may not be. It's a really cold time, folks. Like if you want to call it an ice age, it's going to be really, really cold. Now, that said, there's variability in the atmosphere. I'm not an adherent to much of anything on the extreme belief is to try and figure out what would happen. There can be some variable extremes and still be normal on the earth. That I'm still not sold that what we were told about this ice age, I think this might also be a cover story as well, was not actually true, even though they used it back then, and we can see the continuation and the change of the flip-flop of the environment itself. That we have to be careful to not throw the baby out with the bathwater on this. That we can look back in some past compilations from other people who did the work to show us what the list of lies are and how these people will manipulate us and keep that ring in our nose. I keep telling you to pull out of your nose so that you don't become the accessory to the crime against you, and you become the preservation of the liberty, because this is a constraint on your liberty to constrain your activities and make rules and regulations and support authorities that are going to come in the future to beat you down, constrain you into what they believe based on false information. Actually fraud. And this becomes felony because they didn't have a color. They come as a scientist. It's a color of authority that takes the authority to take away your rights, remedies, and properties by their rule. That's a felony. It's theft by extortion, notwithstanding civil rights, and it's felony coercion. And you should be able to find that in your statutes. Now, as I said that, I remember, I just forgot. I'll remember now here. A couple of people responded to me of last week's discussion on the patent and the definitions between an abstract of title and a chain of title. Don't be confused. The abstract is always a summary. Every time you attach the word abstract to something, it'll only be the summary of something. And we'll see that, I think, in some documents I have here. If I get to them, I'll identify them when I get there. The abstract is always the summary. The chain of title. The abstract is not the chain of title. The chain of title is the chain of the evidence of the possession from you having the ability to prove you have the right to the property described to the and in the patent. So an abstract of anything is a summary, and it's not evidence. It's not sufficient to be evidence. The chain of title is literally evidence. And then it's a chain, literally chained, one link of a chain to the next, chaining you like some slave to the right to your property and all the rights to that. So this is, in a way, the kind of servitude you would like in a place that protects that from everybody else, even the government. This is a completely unique thing in all history of the man, anywhere, that really is the Republican form of government representing you by and through the protections government was supposed to do to understand life, liberty, and property as sacred. Not the government, not those in the government, and not any one that is an NGO that's now in a partnership with that government, which now brings me to this other problem I told you a long time ago. It's coming back out. I told you when you heard about Flint, understand that this is a problem throughout America, and we're going to have, the day of reckoning is Doom'ageddon is on us about this water thing, and this is all part and parcel to the agenda coming on you, these grant stream fundings that aren't placed in the right way, the right decisions aren't made by the people in your governments that you're supposed to be controlling by forcing on them the objective basis of your statutes, and then your analysis on even whether those are accurate or not. But for the most part, they seem to be when you look come from the soil disposal side. And this is water appropriation. And there was a comment on Twitter. I made a comment to somebody. They were making the story about this, and I said, when we understand that we make the distinction between water appropriation and water distribution. The distinction between water appropriation and water distribution, we're going to start to be able to see the dividing chasm that needs to be, where this needs to be fixed and how to keep it fixed. Water appropriation is in the law for appropriators. That's in the grant side. Distribution is in the commerce side. When you tie the appropriation to the distribution, you've just commingled the two, and you cannot come up with a proper view. That becomes addressable by a third party. And in the world we have today, it's going to be by these new smart things, these new public-private partnerships. Everyone's getting theirs against you. This Flint water comes up. America has a nation of Flints was the title of this. And I'm recognizing this only to tell you it was not hard to predict to you a year ago, or maybe more. I don't even know now, folks. It's just a stream of years to me that I told you that we're having a problem with our water already. Flint is not even the tip of it. It's not. It's just a speck. So here's the report to prove it. I guess prove it. You can go just research it. Here's evidence that there's a proof to make. A nation of Flints. America, not Flint now. Not just Florida, America has 1.2 million miles of deteriorating lead pipes, and that'll cost $1 trillion to fix. So we're going to put more money in war, I suppose. Let's drop more bombs, blow more people up, and cause them to come running out of their countries to escape the bombing, and then we blame them for being immigrants, and then we lock the door. And of which Trump wrote this executive order stopping these changing the immigration policy. The court, the ACLU, the champions that don't even know the different distinction between a pardon and a clemency, jumped into court and said, hey, you can't do this. And they're claiming that they won, and in a way they did. They actually just pointed out something that's normal, that the executive order was ordering a little bit more than it was allowed to. But interestingly, it didn't stop that executive order in what parts were proper. In fact, we'll go back to when you analyze this thing about, again, this immigration is tied to this water. You don't understand that this is the plan, folks. And this water is going to cost you tons and tons more money than it should have. When the appropriation was already done and the distribution was supposed to be overseen by the government to be proper and never allowed to deteriorate. The immigration comes in and puts more demands. It destroys your integrity of the laws, and an executive officer comes in, listen, we've got to get handle of this, and then the ACLU comes in and says, well, you can't do that, and then they found out, well, yeah, part of it you can't. And what was the part they actually couldn't, as I understand this, again in a quick review? They couldn't interfere with existing permissions. In other words, the ones that were being affected were the ones with the green cards. They've already been through the process. They've been given notice, everything's cool, and they do comply. The order, it enjoins application on those people, which really is an injustice. You can't, this is the same thing for y'all in America. When you get a license and a permit, you're obligated to function under the permit. They can't put a demand on you or change that outside of the terms of the permit. That's a violation. So on that, I didn't mean to get over on that. But the ACLU came in to show you where they don't understand lots of other things. They came in and said, well, we're going to get rid of this EO. Well, they couldn't. They got rid of the part, though, that really was a violation to people. I mean, think about your life. You do go through the process. You get the green cards. You get the things, the permissions, whatever policy is being made to get them in here, even if it's the work visas, which are really kind of violative to people. I mean, workers here. But let's not analyze that. Just the fact that you've been told you have permission. You've done everything under the law to be here. And then this executive officer says, we're going to toss that back out. Well, the executive officer doesn't have the right to do that. And that was what was seemingly the thing that was enjoined. It was what happened with the green cards is that the law that Congress made was fulfilled in that green card and made license to be here for the term of that grant. And that can't be pulled away. So I wanted to talk a little bit quickly on that. This is the same thing on how you analyze the grants. It's not that big complicated thing, and it's not something to get shoot people and burn people, burn down and destroy stuff. There is a law here, and someone tried to extend their authority beyond, and you see the check and balance that looks proper to me in the context of it. You don't grant somebody something and then pull it away. Well, if that's going to be the case, if the court just recognized that, then what about this confusion between appropriation of water, distribution of water in commerce, and why nobody's stepping in on this unless it's the plan? And the bottom line of all this is you're not going to have quality water. They take the fact that it's messed up and they say, well, you're going to need centralized authority, and you don't realize they've just umbrellaed the appropriation and distribution when they were supposed to focus on just the pipes and the distribution side. And that's another dynamic. But that puts obligations and duties on a couple of entities that doesn't allow for the increased costs, because that was supposed to be already been dealt with within your fees for your payments. And so we see actually a major theft, in my mind, going here that I won't analyze. I don't have the time to. So Trump, the EPA was involved in this, and again, our lawsuit was going after the grant stream funding, which literally cuts off any function to the people. It's really made their infrastructure is that grant stream funding pays for the infrastructure of the oppression and opposition to keep you from getting what you need. In other words, you don't need the infrastructure when the authority actually says that the distribution company, if it's the government, has the obligation to maintain. It's not a question. This is not something that they could allow to degrade. You're looking at an admission of a failure to adhere to a Republican form of representative government and the government's duty to protect all this. So this guy Trump, he makes this thing on the immigration, which is all part of the same plan to me. It's all just parts of these things. Trump administration tells EPA to freeze all grants and contracts. Came out about the same time this Flint, Michigan thing came up, and EPA was supposed to oversee this. In actuality, I don't think they are, but this is how the plan is working now that you see internally to the EPA. It's not a very nice organization. It is part and parcel to the implementation of the global governance, centralized control, destruction of property, and you get what we give you type thing, and doing things in order to get you to agree to this was an extortion up in Flint, and it's across America. And I don't know why there's not more people calling it out and bringing it to task. But Trump comes up and he says, I'm going to freeze now the EPA grants, all grants and contracts. Well, so here's an executive coming against an agency. He has every right within the executive branch to determine what the EPA is going to do, short of the fulfillment of the legislation of Congress. What we found out, and I looked at this and said, well, that's going to, the grants, freezing its grants and contracts, that's exactly would fulfill our injunction for grant stream funding from the EPA to the states and your local DEQs or CEQs in every state, whose agencies are actually to implement federal law. And if you don't understand, there's a statute, every state has a statute. When you take federal funds, federal law applies. And so that's another hidden constraint on all of this. When you take federal funds, federal law applies, and Flint kind of slides into the wire that way as well. And the EPA is in the plan to defeat you, and so nothing gets checked that it's supposed to. That Trump coming in and saying, I'm going to freeze these grants, I'm saying, well, okay, great, if he can do that. If he can do that to the states, that's what we enjoin, because this grant stream funding through the EPA is imposing sustainable development, imposing alternative dispute resolution, imposing the felonies against us. It is what our lawsuit was to have enjoined anyway. Great. Now, let's get back to the reality. It comes out a couple days later on this story that he's not actually stopping all grants to the states. The role of the state and the funding to the states will not change. Well, this is the same problem as the green card holders. You can't tell someone you're going to give them some money and then pull it. That has to finish to the term of its time. And so that part, he couldn't do anyway, and then it comes out later, he didn't actually do that. All the grants and contracts he was talking about was internal to the federal authority he has to control in the administration side. What the administration has done has to continue. What they're now going to do is now constrained by his authority within the congressional fulfillment, the obligations and duties, given they had some. See, this is all, again, now what's the Congress's authority under the Constitution? But to commerce only. Now let's get back to the Flint water. That's distribution, not appropriation. So in my mind, when I were talking about they changed the point of diversion or where they appropriated the water, I think that was a complete violation that never was checked by the people locally. And so we're back to us not having the knowledge to be able to make the right and proper statement. And it's amazing to me, really, to watch how ignorant we are as a people and how much advantage we're being taken of in our ignorance. It's just, I can't tell you how much, I mean, a list of things comes flying through my head when I say that. When I talk to you about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, when I talk about the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, both documents of which are on my Blogcaster page perpetually, the links at least. You are being duped. You're duped, and you're taken advantage of. And I hear crickets. And I guess the big shock to me was the NDA. That's still regurgitating here. The NDAA, when they told us they went extrajudicial, indefinite detention. You don't have a government. You don't have a constitution. We're going to destroy international law. We're going to destroy everything about international law. We're not going to recognize the law of war, that oxymoron. Was the beacon of destruction for us, and I heard crickets, and I haven't been able to get off of that, folks. It's just, maybe that's the deepest wound that I think, yeah, we make a joke of it, but this is part and parcel to our literal destruction as a people, that then now we have nothing to base our we weren't vigilant to preserve liberty. So they say, well, they're not able to, so we're going to put this other stuff on them. In the process, we're going to poison them to force them to do it. Trump comes along, I'm going to do these things. Well, you can only go so far, dude. And I want you to, I guess I'm talking about this because I want you to see there is limits out there. There's a system that does function. And we can work through that. We can utilize that. given the opportunity. That doesn't, we're finding out, that doesn't just enter up in your, just set in your lap. They don't set that opportunity in your lap. You've got to fight tooth and nail because they're all criminals. They're evading the law. Anyway, listening to this thing, that all these contracts, I had this put in my tabs here last week or so. Trump had signed these, you're not going to get any, the money, the freeze on the contracts and the grants. I'm thinking, great. And then a couple days later, they say, oh, wait a minute, that was only for federal side. The state monies are still, the state's role, I found this very interesting. The discussion was the state's role will not be ended. And I said, well, what's the definition of that state's role? What role are they playing in a federal imposition inside the states? And we see, again, where we were thinking if there was going to be a universal freeze in the grants, I didn't know how they were going to do that, but if it was, they'd be actually employing the injunction that our lawsuit requires. In fact, they're not going to really do that. So we now have to understand that, and we have to redouble our efforts to show how they have to, because in the initiation, they violated the law. The contracts and the grants are violations of law. And yet, you see them turning a blind eye to that, which shows you that these people are just continuing the process just by a different way. What if my analogy to y'all? America is a candle. The Democrats burn one end and the Republicans burn the other. The end result will be, no matter which side is burning bright, it consumes the candle, America. Ironically, creating carbon and carbon dioxide. But that's beside the point, isn't it? So along the lines of Trump doing these things and trying to make sense of how it works and anticipating the limits so that we then train ourselves to understand that we've learned the limits. We, I guess, confirm to ourselves we've learned the limits. There's a hierarchy they are following. There's excesses that might be had, and there's ways to remedy that. And even this immigration thing, even though it was proper, it was politically motivated to stop it. I agree that I can't even imagine the chaos that would put in someone's life to be given permission. You think about it, folks. You give permission to do something where there is a permission required, not on every permission, because that's a fraud and an extortion as well, but where you were in a position that you needed to get a permission, and it was given to you. To have that withdrawn in the middle of what you were doing, cannot be very good. And that cannot fulfill the objects of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, in the minimum. Even if they did, I don't know that they went there. They went back more to the common law opinions of the judges about how they were going to interpret that. But notwithstanding, can you imagine that, folks? You were given permission. You fulfilled everything you were supposed to do. You passed through the gate, and all of a sudden you get hauled back in and then deported. Wow, that's an insult for sure. And that part was found to be enjoinable, and until February, I suppose. But I want you to see this not for this. Don't get into the political side of this. Get into the function side of it. Start finding the limits of it. Start looking at the analysis from that, so you can speak locally where you are in these same ways. And I'm saying that because we find going to the black and white organized structure you can point to somewhere that's not your opinion and not someone else's opinion who may have a seat in decision power, but you can point to them that opinion they have isn't found in law. And here's what's found in law, and that's really what they're duty bound to do. Makes you a whole lot more powerful than walking in there and blazing away thinking you know all that you know and what a constitution's supposed to do and how they're supposed to implement it and all these other things that we walk into and really make a fool of ourselves over. So with this guy coming in, Trump, and we see the division and the color revolution that's coming up around it to create a bunch of problems for us all. We have to really start looking at this as a problem and start denouncing this as well. Well, there's been some not so quiet threats against this guy Trump. Even before he was elected, they were surmising, conjecturally, what happens if Trump was to be assassinated. But, to me it sounded a whole lot more like, again, just noise, just to get you off the point. And I think it was Gary L. that posted a report from this guy named Robert Steele, the execution of Donald Trump, when and how. Now, I bypassed that for a day when it came up. I don't really want to get into all that. I think it's not as useful I mean, I don't think it's useful to anybody, even the conjecture. But this guy, Robert Steele, he's an ex-intelligence guy. You know, and whenever I see this, and he talked in some Linux thing for how Linux people and Linux can be used as open source and all this to help free up the society and get, you know, attack surveillance and all, whatever you're going to do. I don't know what all his position was. And he was making a little bit of radical statements in that. But the thing in my mind says, once in intelligence, always in intelligence. So that's the niggle in my mind about these guys. Gary L. comes up with this, the execution of Donald Trump. That wasn't unique. That this guy said it was interesting. It's like, wow, listen to this. Okay, let's go ahead and put him ex-CIA. And then right after that, and I wasn't interested, I said, just keep that out there. Right after that came a bunch of Twitters that had, everyone's saying they're funny. And yeah, they're funny, but again, this is a tool. We're looking at weapons. And I put together just a couple of them, and I asked, who was it I was asking? No, Tragedy and Hope. He sent out to Twitter. And I said, on something that he said, and I put it out to Gary from his. I said, is this and this, are these and this developing this? And what the links go to are now GIFs that put words from movies or just nonsense communications, like as if they're lip syncing, interjecting what it looks like people are saying in the GIF, with Trump being the main target, the main feature here. And, you know, it's pretty funny what they've put together and pretty ingenious what they've done. But when you so that in itself was just, okay, someone's having fun. But when you go back and read what Robert Steele was saying about how and when, that they're going to feed this guy Trump material that's going to make him literally lose his mind, and he won't know it. It'll accentuate the worst in him, and he'll start to look a little nuts. These gifts, in time with that article, got me thinking that, wait a minute, there may be something more to this ex-CIA's statement. That I think we need to pay attention to the manipulation of this meme, as it's being deemed right now, and who these players are that are coming in intelligence, coming to let us know. And I'm not so certain that it's not benign, like there's a warning. I think it's the notice, which makes these guys still players. And I don't want to get too far off of that. But see, this is not talking about assassinating Trump. This is talking about reducing his effectiveness and then putting him in a position where he can be removed. No assassination needed. Okay, did I pause long enough there? Did I give you some pause to think? There's a fascinating dynamic going on. I don't know fully who the players are that are playing and in play. And I don't like to overanalyze. But when I see these dots develop all in the same time, almost as if it is a plan, I've learned not to disregard them. And so where I was not going to really, I was just interested that this Robert Steele guy would sign his name to it. He actually I put my name to this post. He actually points out how unique this is right up front. And I wasn't too interested. But when memes, within a day, memes come out to qualify what he says as a direction to plant the seed. I said, folks, I had to tell you all, we have to pay attention. This is not just about this guy Trump. This is about, what we think is the so-called powers that be, whether they should or shouldn't, may not be so certain. That there's, again, we don't know who is in play. But there is a destruction afoot. And the only thing I can see is that we have to be cognizant of that point so that we don't play in or get played into these things. I see a lot of people, I'm running stuff down too, wasted your time. And we have to learn as quickly as we can to look through some of these things for what they are, put them in the proper context, place them in the proper play, and either give them our attention and then respond to them in the proper way, or learn that we are wasting our time and not put so much time into it. When I first heard this, I just kind of I looked at it, dismissed it a bit. Didn't until hours later, and then all of a sudden I said, "Wow, this is how could he possibly come out and say that?" And then these memes come out to plant the seed of exactly what he just said. And it doesn't turn out exactly the way he says it. In other words, they don't have to poison Trump. They just make you think that he's going to come out by accentuating your perception of his activities, that he's nuts. And they move. And you agree. We don't have to go to the point. Once they get the people understanding a certain thing and agreeing to a certain thing, they don't need to go further. And I think they keep track of this, and all this big data does that for them. I mean, we're hearing it, the Watson and IBM, this notorious company, keeping track of people for nasty reasons, involve a machine, now artificial intelligence, having the ability to do functions that workers would do in the more mechanical, like economic filings of paperwork and qualifying certain rules and regulations. A computer can certainly do that. It's just a computer does that by its own nature. It qualifies rules all the time. That's how it runs. So this is not a great leap. But IBM's given this ability through Watson now to determine you by your Twitters, by your Facebooks, by whatever posts you do, by your emails now, right? And they can gauge this thing. Now, apparently, the Clinton people didn't have this. Their interpretation plug was pulled because they missed it big time. I'm trying to not take any position here one way or the other. I'm saying there's actions in the world going on. They're detrimental to the people, and until the people see more properly the foundations and what's going on, we really are not going in a better direction. The technocrats have us. And we've done it to ourselves and all the stuff I've told you before. Now, this thing about assassination, there's planting the seed about Trump, and that it would have been, really would have been a nasty little thing from where the precariousness of the society is at this point, all made up, but people seem to buy into that. Based on, remember, we just heard that Trump ordered this EO. Whether it was this EO or another one, he also, and we heard that he can now pull some fundings. He issued an EO over sanctuary cities. Now, sanctuary cities are, again, part of this global governance push. And they're tied to the immigration, which I told you, Agenda 2030 tells us. They do things in other nations to cause a departing country to exist, a receiving country, and that the emigration of those people, by the reasons they've created, are beneficial to both. And the purpose is to re-engage the departed country as a sustainable debt country where they reinstall their infrastructure to continue the obliteration of peoples. That the sanctuary cities are just another operation that you'll probably find in liberal camps, progressive camps. Again, this progressive agenda and method is a felony against us. We've identified that this is beyond question. That we heard really quickly to show you that your local areas are subject to federal law and are just welfare queens. I'll put it that way. All your cities are welfare queens. You want to point at Walmart. You want to condemn the corporations. Occupy this and that, and we condemn the corporations. The city is definitely a corporation. No doubt that it receives welfare from the federal government. And if it doesn't comply with the federal mandates, as every state law would say, even as a corporation itself, and most probably notably because, they will lose this funding that shows you the federal funding. This is, to me, proof that federal funding conditions your what, folks? Your principles. That if Miami was so certain in its consideration of being a receiver of sanctuary for people, and they've contorted this word sanctuary. Sanctuary used to be a wholly different jurisdiction. That's impossible. This is the other thing. I mean, there's so much to analyze here. As I keep on going, my mind just starts to click off a bunch of things. That the principle of sanctuary was quickly defeated when there wasn't going to be a bribe to continue it or being a welfare recipient from the federal government. That we see Miami-Dade mayor orders jails to comply with Trump's crackdown on sanctuary counties. Oh, wow, we're already down to the county now, where your local power is. So your counties are welfare queens. For those of you who think otherwise, that you can just go against the government and say you stand on something and say you're against corporations when in fact corporations are paying you to be there, and you buy into the sanctuary status, you buy into this immigration stuff, you buy into sustainable development, you buy into whatever whatever's they're selling, you buy into it, is really a mark on you, as far as I can tell, and this ability to be bribed. So Miami-Dade mayor should resign. He's bribable. He's a welfare queen. He's willing to put that on all the counties and subject to the federal will. He's not keeping the separation of the state versus federal, is he? And yet I hear crickets, right? Again, we can go through. Actually, some of you listening to me may think, oh, I'm maybe agreeing with certain other things. No, there's a different analyses on all this stuff. As I told you, make categories and possibilities, and you start to develop for you the breadth and scope of everything that's in front of you. Am I saying, well, if he would maintain the state authority and said no, that the people would pay to be a sanctuary city, that's right? No, I'm not saying that either. I'm just telling you, on the surface, he's a welfare queen. He is not upholding the obligations and duties of the state under the 10th Amendment. And that should tell you his amenability to bribes. And his cabinet, or whatever they have, and his commissioners, everybody else. This is to me evidence of the very thing that we identified to sue and stop. Five states are considering bills to legalize the right to repair electronics. You folks, I would have never, coming from electronics and repair, I would have never guessed that you need a law that says you have a right to repair electronics. And then you read the story and found out why. And it made sense because, I was weaned off of that, because you can't get the parts you need, you can't get the schematics you need to do the analyses. Well, if you do, you got to pay hundreds of dollars, and you get into a program of a third-party company offering you this information, like automotive mechanics have to do, and the special instruments, only to authorized people, like Apple does. Now, Apple's been caught on that. But the 5 states are considering the right to legalize the right to repair electronics. In other words, they cannot no longer monopolize your ability to repair your own equipment. And I'll tell you, unless you've got some pretty hefty equipment, I don't know how you're going to do it now with all the micro-miniaturization of all this. But however, 5 states now, you see how ridiculous life becomes as commerce starts to rule, consumerism rules. You can't fix something because you have to work into the planned obsolescence. That a state has to step up, or 5 of them here, the right to repair electronics. So that's the obvious story. What got me, and I had to chuckle a little bit, remember last week we talked about Britain's kind of toying with a proposal to make every robot, everything that's essentially AI or can make a decision or be taxed or whatever, becomes having rights. That I'm wondering, I don't know if this is not an anticipation. See, the government people that are in the system, that are already invested in lots of places that get the backdoor money that you see, that you don't understand how they make money of this. I don't fully understand it, but I can see the dynamic. The right to repair is not your right to repair. The technocrats are setting up so it's their equipment's right to repair. Because once these AIs get the rights, they have your rights. They're just another person, genderless. They're a zit. They got no gender. They have no gender problems here. They are going to have the right to go hack a system to get the information to fix themselves, was what occurred to me. It's one of the potentials and possibilities. That just a few days later, we get the information and notice that a robot proves to Google he's not a robot. Now, I don't know where the gender came from, but that's what the title says. The robot proves to Google he's not a robot. Google claims its reCAPTCHA system is tough on bots and easy on humans, but this robot successfully managed to outwit it. Completely ties into what I'm saying, folks. When this robot can determine it is not a robot, and Google agrees, another robot recognizing that it's not, this robot is not very far from asking for an EBT card, the right to vote, health care, Social Security, and paying taxes, just like that UK bill said last week that I reported on. And the monkey down there in Argentina, coming up to the banana republic called America, ordering up his bananas on his EBT card, is going to be a bit of a fight, but they're both going to have that right, aren't they? If you don't think this starts to get wild, yeah, maybe I'm pushing it just a little bit, but I said possibilities and probabilities, and that's what we have to pay attention to. You are moving into a technocratic life. Your life is nothing if it's not digitized. That a robot can get on, and I know it was a little bit of a setup here, but when the robot can select the mark that says it's not a robot, you're not very far from a robot making a decision on what benefits it wants. Speaking of hacking the system with a robot, goodbye Yahoo to rename itself Altaba, I guess they want to pronounce it that way, after Verizon deal. So all the y'all on Yahoo, I suppose maybe my address may be changing for the mark on the beast at yahoo.com. I don't know. Those of you, just to let you know, Yahoo is going to rename itself because it just got bought out by Verizon. And so another company is hacking you and able to hack you, and the name of that company is changing on your service if it goes on. So life is being hacked by the robots who can now self-confirm. And we thought that was way off in the future, la-la type science sci-fi. It's around the corner. I want to call your attention back to the fact of your cashless society, in your legal digital existence, how hackable it is. New Trojan turns thousands of Linux devices into proxy servers. Now, there was a myth, and it says it right up front here, there was a myth that Linux didn't get viruses. Well, part of the problem was that Linux has such a small user base that it didn't mean much. Now, that user base is still small, but it's sizable. And so, now that it's on the target, and I think mainly Google, again, making it a base, somewhat of a base for its Android system, which now your phones under Android is really controlled by Google, and you find that out, that it is now being known to be hackable. As it finally occurred to me, when you can root the phone and they use exploits, that's what they're telling you. We can exploit the Linux system. We can exploit the Android system, whatever they've done. A new Trojan has been discovered in the wild that turns Linux-based devices into proxy servers, which attackers use to protect their identity while launching cyber attacks from the hijacked system, making you the target instead. And so I'm not going to get too much into this more than we really, again, in this digital age, in the big data age, in the technocracy that's coming on us, that controls us, that's running all this thing from Flint water to national water, to your smart devices, to your laws that allow robots to be now persons with rights, and sanctuary cities, all this, the migration, the sustainable debt, which is all going to be cashless ultimately. You really have to pay attention. Because you're vulnerable, I guess, is the main point. And we're going to have to understand how to become less vulnerable. And as I looked down and saw a flash on, I've only got this one little line. Gary L. advises me in the RLM chat that Verizon, along with AT&T, agreed to turn over all its customer communications to the NSA. So there you are. Pretty simple. Just like what I told you about, it makes a common, the old plan. That's what Microsoft did with Skype. I'm absolutely convinced of it, and still today, nothing changes me. More vulnerabilities to your phones, folks. And this is they want to have you keep your stuff going through your phone. This is where it's going to be your central command. It is a computer that does all the things that we need to have done by their imposition, and you're not responding in the proper way, and they know to continue. The nasty Android malware that infected millions returns to Google Play Store. So this story in a nutshell, and again, I'm just going the headlines and I'll just go on because I read a little bit. I don't want to waste too much time. I need you to know about this stuff. It's part of the war against us, as I conceive of it. And I can't find many people that ultimately don't eventually see it that way themselves after you look around a little bit. We really have to have that mentality. It doesn't mean I'm a warmonger. It means that I'm in a war that I didn't understand I was in. I better get up to snuff. Well, maybe not snuff, but I better get up to par quick. Nasty Android malware that infected millions of returns to Google Play Store tells you there was a nasty malware that was already in Google Play Store for a long time, infected a lot of people. Google finally caught it. They say they have a system to catch it. They didn't catch this. Well, it comes back. It comes back with a vengeance. They will tell you that they got rid of it. It's called Humming Whale. It's in your APK files, and what was striking to me before I was knowing about that, I was looking at downloading. I didn't realize how vulnerable they really were. And so third-party suppliers of APK files, though they may say they come from as well as Google Store, are certainly not a protection either. You are vulnerable. As I was telling you, you better know this technology in and out, and I don't think that we can be. So we're in a big vulnerability, and you're going to have to understand that. Your utilities, your accounts, your banks, your funds, your records in places and businesses are all vulnerable to all these things. If you have a phone, you are vulnerable. Look, you can just be blamed for something because your phone now becomes a proxy for the one who's actually doing the crime against somebody. That's as an accessory then, folks. The Humming Bad was the original malware that they found in over 10 million Android devices around the world last year, made its gang an estimated 300,000 per month at its peak, and that has made a comeback and now dubbed Humming Whale. Again, not going to get too deep in this. Our electronic devices are vulnerable to a harm to you, is my message to you. And here's I don't have a phone, I won't do it, all this and that and the other. Well, I don't know how you're going to get a hotel, but if you could get a hotel, here's how you can still be affected by this nonsense of these hackers getting into these vulnerable systems. And I have a suspicion they're made. I mean, I know there's a technological thing. I mean, how can you plug every hole? But I believe that some of these things are made that way for the reasons that they're made that way. And that means someone's making money on the backside, excess is being done, favors are being done. And in this way, hotel ransomed by hackers as guests are locked into their rooms. So you can be someone if you could get into a hotel now without ID and digital, this and that and the other, and I guess there's still a lot more of those than there are airplane tickets to get. You could be locked in your room because some hotel employee opened an attachment that installed a ransomware and locked out the entire hotel system. Not just the entry, not just the registration. Your hotel key gets locked. And I don't see how this is, to me, this is a prank, if nothing else. If it wasn't tied to ransomware where you'd have to pay to unlock it, This would be, I can't imagine this is not within the realm of just being a prank. That our lives are susceptible to this digital construction that we're all agreeing to. Google has an Android security problem. I guess the thing is, I hadn't really truly appreciated how many phones are out there. And these are the portals of destruction to a peaceful life through a digital means. Google has an Android security problem. This was an opinion. Security is everyone's responsibility, not just those with the cash to upgrade. And so now it's on you all. Everyone who has this, it's up to us to have to defend ourselves. It's another attack. I won't read these things. We're just talking hacking our life, hacking the future of our lives. It's to gain the control. It's to monopolize things. It's to get you to force to be. Listen, if the ransom, who knows? Eventually, the government becomes its own ransomware maker. I mean, that seems to be the next logical progression. We didn't do it. They'd go through the proxy of your phone. We could never know, could we? Who has the most information about you but the government? So conjecture, put it a possibility, whatever that were. I think these vulnerabilities are really terrible to be walking ourselves into without checks and balances. Better than what's being foisted on us by the thousands in our legislatures at this point, because the machine has been plugged in, turned on, and the off switch broke, and that off switch was at our finger. The hacking of our life. FDA approves new GMO pineapple without independent study testing. Here's what you need to know was another article that I found weeks ago. And luckily, and I think they may have done this on purpose, luckily they've made this thing, it's now, what is it, pink grapefruit. This pineapple, which are normally yellow, for those of you that live in a cave and never, and not in the tropics and don't go to the store and never seen a pineapple, are yellow. This is pink grapefruit pink. And so that's cool, except this little notice to us is that they will not tell us that it's a GMO pineapple. Now, I don't know what y'all feeling about genetic manipulation. My view is, and my study has been long before any of this stuff came up, in looking at the technology, the mere introduction of a change in the DNA structure causes the DNA structure to promote proteins and enzymes which tend to protect it against everything else, even you. And there's no way for them to fix that. Even the CRISPR stuff can't change that, apparently. It's just a natural protective mechanism. Pretty marvelous, actually. But here you are. You're going to have a pink pineapple to be grown in Costa Rica, and Del Monte is doing it in the hybridization of your life. And this hacking of life, the technocrats coming forward to rule everything. I guess they're ruling the roost this year. We're in the Chinese New Year now, the year of the rooster. I guess this is a little bit, well, I better not say it. There's another word for rooster, and together with the Trump grabbing, other things come to mind about this year and what it means. However, this hacking that's going on of life, we were just a few years ago questioning the ethics of hacking people, the so-called human genome, and understanding it. And writing's on the wall. If they're going to understand it, they're going to hack it. And sure enough, folks, it's here already. Within the time of Vince, and thank you, Vince, making a big deal. I really don't think about it. We're at BTWRLM199 on Real Liberty Media, 199. It's 199 weeks approximately. And so Vince has been touting that I'm going to hit 200 next week. So I don't really pay attention, but yeah, thank you. That's right. But all this time, this is just on RLM. Remember, I was on 2 other networks before. Not a lot of years compared to other people, but a substantial amount of time still. In this short amount of time, we've gone from questioning the technology that would manufacture what we call chimera. It's called chimera, the hybridization of species, to doing it, folks. Hybrid zoo, introducing pig-human embryos, 100% and rat mouse. Chimeras could pave the way for growing human organs in other animals. Scientists, well, we've got big quotes on that, don't we, have published the first peer-reviewed, who does the peer review, folks, but other scientists, in quotes, account of creating pig-human hybrid fetuses, a step toward growing animals with organs that are suitable for transplantation in humans. Folks, what part of the human chimera would you not be violating in order to make this to harvest its organs? If they can make a robot a person with rights, what about these things? And I'm not, I mean, how much more do we have to talk about the insanity of this? I won't even read more. It actually starts to bother me a lot. And I just can't go through it. I really don't, I just can't tell you. I just, does it even register? Introducing pig-human embryos. I'm speechless. Okay, did I prove it? I paused a little bit without a word, so I'm trying to show you there is things that can shut me up. What shuts me up more in some regard, and exasperation, is the crickets. And so these are the technocrats getting their way. They will make the future servants they need. And there's going to be a small group of people that have been put in their place because you didn't stop them. And we will not have preserved liberty. That has to be respect for ourselves in not being insulted into becoming a pig human animal. And it's a pig man. I guess it would be Pygmalion, maybe. But that's another fiction and a literary construction, isn't it? But pig human. I mean, again, well, enough. This is enough sanity. Do we need more? I guess so. Cambridge scientists consider fake news vaccine. If you don't think, it starts getting nuts and nuttier, and we are listening to it. A University of Cambridge study I thought this came from The Onion, folks. I mean, it's just getting this nuts. And then I found the report, the actual study. They actually published it. The University of Cambridge study devised psychological tools to target fact distortion. Who determines that, folks? Researchers suggest, quote, preemptively exposing, close quote, readers to a small, quote, dose of the misinformation can help organizations cancel out bogus claims. Stories on the U.S. election in Syria are among those that have caused concern. Quote, misinformation can be sticky, spreading and replicating like a virus. So can the truth, you wayfarers listening to me behind the woodshed. The idea is, in quote, is to provide a cognitive repertoire that helps build up resistance to misinformation, so the next time people come across it, they are less susceptible. Isn't that the definition of what we're doing here behind woodshed? Isn't that it? Educating and informing the whole mass of the people on how to look through this nonsense. I mean, really. So here, let's get to the Forbes, fake news site. Psychological vaccine, in quotes, may protect against fake news, alternative facts. Coming out of Forbes, a well-timed paper from 3 universities in England and the U.S. researchers lay out a strategy for inoculating the public against the fake news and alternative facts that have been rampant in recent history. Well, they would be inoculating us against the mainstream media, right? Or anybody that just parrots the mainstream. It doesn't have a thought in your brain otherwise. And then we get to the study. There's actually was a study. And so the Onion, I guess maybe was getting their story from here. Inoculating the public against misinformation about climate change was the actual study. So these are the pro-climate change sham artists, the same ones that give us the Doom'ogeddon clock, all right? They're going to try and hit you up, figure out how to get you to understand and program you to like a fraud. Effectively addressing a climate change requires significant changes in individual and collective human, animal, you said they don't say animal, I'm putting in animal, collective human behavior and decision making. It's all about behavior. Yet in light of the increasing politicization of climate, in parentheses, science, should have put that in quotes, and the attempts of vested interest groups to undermine the scientific consensus on climate change through organized, quote, disinformation campaigns, identifying ways to effectively engage the public about the issues across the political spectrum has proven difficult. Yeah, the truth is really hard to suppress, isn't it? But remember, scientific consensus. Scientific in this case is really lobbyists. Consensus is a felony. How do you know that? We'll go to Jefferson Mining District, find the MMAC documentation, and read how it plays out. Law-based interpretations of what's going on. You can see this consensus-based, this alternative dispute resolution concepting is a felony against you. And this is supposed to be a scientific study done by academia. Oh, it's the seed of urbanism, isn't it? It's the seed of power of the urbanites is academia. And so I wanted to point out as well, I was just reading in part, and it's only 3 or 4 more paragraphs, getting you back to the patents and what an abstract is. I am reading from the abstract of this study, or report, whatever the heck you want to, fraud, this misinformation. That first paragraph is called the abstract. That is a summary. No different than your abstract of title is a summary. It does not tell you the who, what, where, why, and when, and evidence of how they came to that summary. An abstract of title is the abstract of the description of what the totality of this study was. And you can get this link, and you can see it right there. It's clear as day. An abstract is a summary. They even have it highlighted in a little grayish box. And then they say introduction. They go back now into what I would tell you would be considered in the correlation to the patent would be, or the proof of it, would be your chain of title. How, the links, how they came to the findings they have, not the summary. So an abstract is a summary. You see this clearly on this study, and then you see them right below is what I would call like the chain of how they got there, how you got to the summary, what the summary covers, and the more fully the evidence of what they're telling you about. And so trying to give you correlation, even in so-called science, even in this fraud science, an abstract is just a summary. Abstract of title is a summary. The chain of title is the chain of evidence of possession. It's not an abstract. It's literally the evidence of how you get from point A, from the past and the patent to today to you. Now, we're in league of this inoculating the public against misinformation, which is them, folks. You see, they are the ones doing the misinformation and trying to figure out how to get around you. What did I tell you? These people have a process. They do monitoring, they do data collection, evaluation, and then they tell the solution of how they're going to get around. They're the amoeba, how they're going to get around your resistance. This is that document. They're having some serious problem with you all. You really need to stop listening to people like me. And when those of you that take my advice and go doing your own research, you're your own problem to them. And thank you and congratulations. On this inoculation vaccine theme, Robert F. Kennedy's devastating quotes on vaccines and the CDC was a report by John Rappaport again, doing his journalistic best to pull together and compile the evidence in some cohesive manner so we can understand, if we weren't focused on it, what there is to know that this Kennedy has been tapped by Trump to investigate this, run the CDC or so, if I get that right, that he has made over time some very powerful disclosures in quotes that John compiles. That anybody involved in this and any other thing about the government that you see is wrong but can't put your finger on it, this gives you the plan as well. But specific to the CDC, the observations of what they're doing wrong. So any of you all that are interested in this vaccine situation and coming to terms with it and getting others to see what the truth about some of this is evidence. I tell you, when you look at what the subject matter of each statement is, you start to see that's applicable across the board. For those of you that maybe are still reticent to file your DEA paper on the rule defining CBD oil. Did you do that yet, folks? Really? Have you? Have you helped yourself? Another story, I guess we're on the health side of this and how to combat the lies against us. And then the wonder at the same level what can be done. But then the hidden story that's right in your face that's really the big deal. Doctors saved Canadian woman's life by removing her lungs for 6 days. Fascinating. Just that thought. So that's what they got you thinking. How does a woman live? I mean, it's fantastic. How does she live for 6 days? That she lives for 6 days and then she comes out of it. Well, it's just a fascinating read. The reason partly is that they had to remove her lungs because she had an infection in them that wouldn't go away, and then we get the killer point. It wouldn't go away because all the antibiotics they tried to use wouldn't stop the bacteria in her lungs. They decided the Hail Mary pass was the only option for medicine. They had to cut her lungs out and stick her on machines that would keep her alive. Fascinating that they could do that. The underlying point here, folks, we talked about it last week. I'm trying to go here. I'm trying to make this relevant from broadcast to broadcast. We were told last week that someone died because there was no antibiotic to stop the infection. Something had happened to me that I told you I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the antibiotic. So Western medicine saved me. But now this happens to you. It may not save you. There is no antibiotic to these super bugs that have been created. If nothing more than the nature's resistance to a poison to it, life will go on. And Western medicine's complete oblivion to that. The technocrats' thought that I can control the whole of universe and the creation is evidenced right here. Fascinating to keep the woman on life support for that many days without lungs. She had to get replacements. They finally came in. They didn't know if they were going to get any when they pulled the lungs, but they knew they couldn't keep it up. As soon as they pulled the bacteria-laden lungs that were hard like footballs out of her chest, 20 minutes later, she's much, much, much better, just without her lungs. So all you chimera out there that have some lungs that we don't know about that you already exist, you might be put on tap. When you don't get in that Uber car to the hospital for your checkup next time. No more antibiotics, folks. The odds are coming on. Notice week by week. You get an infection, you may not survive it. Well, unless they want to do the hackathon on you. Fascinating stuff, but that's not cheap. And boy, if they call up Trump scare now, it goes from Obama scare to Trump scare. I don't know what we're getting with any of this. I don't know why they just don't go back to the original system. When you needed help at a hospital, they just fixed you. And then they build the government. They already had that. I told you that before, a long time ago. They'd had to do nothing here to the system. Just extend it to doctors. So Trump scare, they're going to get a call, send it in. Oh, no, he's not. He's too old. Too much money. Stop it. We're going to cut costs here. Antibiotics. We don't have anything to save them anyway. Pull the plug. Eye disease resulting from increased use of fluorescent lighting as a climate change mitigation strategy. Can you abstract? So here's the short form. Right? So right off the bat, the scientific study has an abstract. The short form. Not the evidence of the title, how they did it. The short form. Every abstract is going to be a summary. Increased use of fluorescent lighting as a climate change mitigation strategy may increase eye disease. All you chimera out there with eyeballs, don't jump in that Uber car. Don't go to the hospital for your eye checkup. I wonder if those pig-human chimera, if they ever developed a belief in Islam, what would happen? What are we doing here, folks, that the ethicists aren't even touching? Getting back to this. Climate change mitigation strategy to may increase eye disease. The safe, how so, folks? We have to read the summary here. The safe range of light to avoid exposing the eye to potentially damaging ultraviolet radiation is 2,000 to 3,500 Kelvin, K. In photography, that's important. This is the when you see warm light or blue light and all, what it looks like to us. The temperature is that indication. Cooler light, a lower number is a warmer light. More browns, oranges, yellows, or tans, I guess. And then it goes the other side to blues, and what we end up seeing is white. Greater than 500 nanometers, the fluorescent lights fall outside the safe range. Fluorescent lighting may increase UV-related eye disease by up to 12%, according to our calculations, may cause an additional 3,000 cases of cataracts and 7,500 cases of pterygia annually in Australia. Enough. I mean, okay, I got one more paragraph for the abstract, folks. A greater control of UV exposure from fluorescent lights is required. This may be a particular concern for aging populations in developing countries and countries in northern latitudes where there is greater dependence on artificial lighting. So they didn't even check this stuff, folks. So they come after the fact. You think it's going to change? No, they don't care. They don't care. They want to get you all to believe that this reduced energy is what it's about. It's all a fraud. And they hand you a bulb, these smaller bulbs that put out a light that's going to affect your eyes. And wow, that's just more money. 3,000 K. You think that's a cheap operation to your eyes? And then I wonder why all of a sudden I hear talk about people with cataracts. There seems to be an increase in that over the years at younger and younger rates. I wonder what's causing it, folks. So part of the mitigation for you to mitigate climate change would be to maintain your fluorescent bulbs, but maintain the warmer bulbs, I guess, to use, so that we at least have some information we can use a bit, while they have outlawed incandescent bulbs with regular resistance filaments, which are way more expensive in energy-wise, and they do take more energy. You would think, though, that if they were actually doing us a favor, that they would figure out what the body responds to and keep us safe. But that's not. Safety and security is not for you. It's for the system, the bottom line. And the bottom line, if they make your eyes go bad, well, then the doctor wins, the ophthalmologist wins, the hospital wins. Insurance companies may win because then they scare everybody to get insurance, because now you can't live with that big a bill on your head. On and on. So connected to eyes was this glaucoma relief that marijuana gave us, a natural substance, a plant, not a chemical, a plant. And we see now, as this global movement of cannabis use starts to unfold to supposedly allow it. They say it's legalization. I tell you, that's the trap. And this article kind of explains that. If you didn't believe me, not that you don't, but I mean, if you wanted more proof, light up. Israel moves closer toward decriminalizing marijuana. Like, who cares? It's not even a real government. But at any rate, they're authority now. Small-time cannabis users in Israel holding fewer than 15 grams of the plant could see legal ramifications of their possession significantly reduced in coming months. And the key about this I want you to see in this story when you go and read it, and I'll just stop because I can read and read. I got to almost read the whole thing to set it all up. The takeaway here is when you see the small user, the small time constriction, it's explaining control. So legalization is, read again, they call it decriminalization here. And this is in the use of the word decriminalize, to maintain the criminalization but lessen it, is another definition for decriminalizing. So now I have to move, because now the future's moving to say the word decriminalize in its negative connotation, I have to move with you to something like non-criminal. Non-criminalize the use of cannabis. In this case, decriminalize, you'll see by the article, is the criminalization to a lesser extent and by constraints. It's the same thing as permit, registration, license. And so we adjust. And I have to, I guess more to the point, I have to adjust now. I've been saying decriminalize this stuff, but the word they're using now, the way they're going to use it in the future, is to make it less criminal. And so we have to now move. We have to jump off our little lily pad, jump onto the wherever we get to go that's a little bit safer, and something like non-criminalize it, making an weird word now that everyone's mind's focused on it. We can make a weird word and we can claim that. It's something that the other side that's trying to keep constraints on you can't go. And this is my method if I have one. You need to shift the frame of the discussion over until everyone can see certain things, and then you define the thing in the next step that the system of control can't get to. And this is the same thing I tell you about understanding and making sure you have the chasm between, what did I say earlier with the Flint water? There needs to be an understanding between appropriation and the distinction between that, which is grant by the policy consideration that makes everything work for us by grant versus the distribution or commerce. What they're talking about in decriminalization as a lessened crime is commerce. So they're still saying that small-time users are in commerce at 15 grams or less, which is about half an ounce for all you folks that are into, what was that, a half a lid or whatever, what was that? Anyway, doesn't matter. So I wanted to call our attention to this anticipation. The vocabulary adjusts to, keep trying to take territory. I'm trying to show you move the conversation to a place, and then when you finally take action as your cricket and you jump, you're jumping because you have the knowledge and where you need to jump to start becoming active. You jump to a place that the occupier can't go. How is he going to non-criminalize it? So they took the word that we were using, trying to take that terrain. We have another place to run, and it's a place they can't defeat us. Now, I'm saying that with some arrogance, I suppose. I guess might be someone smarter that can use non-criminal in the context of regulation. I don't know. It's not conceivable to me. But my point is a methodology of addressment and remedy against the oppression. I guess that's what I'm talking about always. I bring this stuff up not to even talk to you about it. I mean, you may not even be interested in a lot of this stuff, and I'm not interested in much of any of it. I see underneath all this stories the underpinnings of our servitudes. Whatever name you want to put on it. It was the failure to preserve our liberty, in liberty being free within the constraint of a society where we all get along peacefully. Why that seems such a big problem, I don't know, but apparently that causes lots of trouble. And people create fairy tale myths around this concept. So marijuana is now, we use the word decriminalize, it's going to be criminal. Now we might start to see it's always dealt with in the commerce side, not the grant side. And we move on over now to an interesting little story that popped up that I am it's going to be fascinating to watch how they do this, but they're making the attempt. And we're tying now together the plant, the commerce, with the medium of exchange that's going to be controlled by the government, as it appears it's going to try to do, and yet the anomaly as to how, other than more regulatory connections, where Washington bill, and I assume this is the state of Washington, I'm just having the title in front of me, so excuse me. And I don't remember, I pulled this up a while back ago, but Washington bill would make it illegal to pay for weed with Bitcoin. I give license to the title on weed. Not just any weed, but it is a weed, isn't it? Yes, so Washington bill, state of Washington, I suppose, will make it illegal to pay for weed with Bitcoin. Fascinating here. Why? And then the other thing is, this is all done because the federal law says it's a criminal substance, and the state hasn't made provisions to make monetary exchanges. And where it hasn't, it's now also going to make it illegal, it claims, to use a Bitcoin to make payment. It's really a nonsense on its face. But more importantly, did Washington make Bitcoin? And if it didn't make Bitcoin, which it's only lawful to make what? The Constitution says a species, we have the word species, money that is in the form of weight and measure, gold and silver. That I don't understand how they have the right to regulate something they don't make, control, or have any authority over, unless it's by and through the fact they own the pot. And you, as I've said before, you in your legalized sense, not the decriminalized side, this is the legalized side, are the weed plantation owned by the state. You're the sharecropper. You're the slave to the state when you legalized. That Bitcoin, you are told you can't use Bitcoin. This is I'm kind of lost on where all this stuff can go. How in the heck are they doing this? Then, for me, notwithstanding the application to be able to grow legally the amount of commercial dope, how's a state who is constrained by the obligation of contracts able to interfere with the consideration that an open and free contract would be made in the sale? Notwithstanding the other problem that the obligation and duty of the state is to honor farm to market underneath the land disposal that Congress fulfilled as an obligation to the state in its enabling acts. Did I just lose a whole bunch of people? I get the feeling I lost some people here. You need to go back and listen to what I just said. This is all the stuff we let go bias. Bias, no doubt. Prejudice. That allows these guys to take over. And we don't understand simple concepts. This is a fascinating statement. I'm going to be interested to see how they pull it off. Not really. I think they're just going to do it by the failure, our ignorance, and our failure to go against it. Now, this is going to get some pushback. I suspect it won't get the proper pushback. Maybe I'm just saying this to those of you that are there can get some word back, maybe to consider these things. Maybe there's a more developed intellect that can look at this and develop better what maybe I'm even looking at here. But on the surface, just from the title, the government is telling you that you are its property by your activity. And that word activity is a special word as well. And we don't sit and say, wait a minute, notwithstanding the 1938 wheat case, where the government had no authority to issue that order because it was contrary to the fulfillment of Congress, which the judiciary is subject to, that a man on a farm has the right of production to market by his grant, the patent. How in the heck is Washington taking possession of all this? Is you giving up that property without any fight. And I don't mean fight in fighting it. I mean walking in without the question, where do you have a right in my patent forever to impose your legislation where I have the right to grow and market? I don't have to put it in commerce. I don't have to put it in distribution. You get it, folks. I tie it back to the water thing, the distinction. My grant side cannot touch, it does touch, but not lawfully, the distribution side. The grant side does not touch actually the commerce side. That's when the government picks it up. And they put everything into commerce. And now Bitcoin is also identified as a state property in commerce. You cannot use it as a consideration. Would, to my mind, breach the obligation to contract, which includes a consideration for every contract, and the fact that they can't interfere with that contract as one option to make a discussion, not an argument, showing them, show cause how you're not violating this provision that you are prohibited to do, where you have the option to make coin, weight and measure silver coin, gold coin. Why aren't you? Might be a good pry bar to get the states to start making independent specie instead of currencies and dealing in federal funds that could be funded by farm-to-market activities, derivative businesses, folks. Maybe. And I'm not going to wholesale buy that. I'll just throw that out there because that's what most people understand and will allow. That we now see that the Bitcoin blockchain technology is possessed of the government seems to be not a joke. I mean, it's a joke that no one sees this coming. That we also see in the same week, Commonwealth Bank of Australia issues government bond on blockchain. Now I see a connection why Washington thinks it can do this. It owns this technology, apparently, and you are the sharecropper to its lands. And I hear crickets. The bank says Queensland Treasury Corporation, you get it, folks? Successfully used the blockchain to generate a bond tender and view investor bids in real time, visualize investments, allocations, and settle instantly with investors. You're an investor, folks? You're not in the game. Forget it. It's done. Here's the point. A Queensland Treasury Corporation is the corporation. It's not the government. It's a corporation that issues its own bond tender using blockchain. That is the blockchain it has jurisdiction over, not the one that you use in Bitcoin. They specifically say blockchain here. They don't say Bitcoin. Washington says Bitcoin like it owns it. Another challenge. So, understand the governments are in this already. Europe proposes restrictions on payments in cash. Another discussion about that we've been talking this cashless society on the heels of the Davos elites, the evil lights, stating that they want to see cashless system. EU pops up with its proposal. Restrictions on payments in cash in favor of going to a digitized system. On the heels of that, Canuckistan revealed as a quiet tax haven. Now I got my questions about Ron Steffens. Is that you a rich man with a tax haven up there, Ron? That Canuckistan is revealed as a quiet tax haven while they beat down on Panama. I told you, they're all over the place, folks. And Nevada, for the United States, Nevada is one of the best. That they get you focused on something else and you don't understand it's already going on, is what I told you back then. It's now revealed that Canuckistan is a quiet tax haven. They're not actually unlawful. They're planned for. They bring business. They allow for the pass-through of funds as if it's money laundering. And when they don't like you, they'll call it money laundering. I won't even go on more. I mean, just connection and link after link of evidence, folks, is how I see it, to inform you better of what you really need to start laying out for yourself in the future to protect you and your little ones. And their little ones, and on, and your friends that are friends, actual friends, and the ones that all y'all stop fighting amongst yourself and realize you are the target. You are the sharecropper. You are the beast of burden. You are the human resource, which will have pig DNA in you soon in the future. And what about those that are created? I told you that the government of Australia chose the blockchain. They own that part of that blockchain. What happens when the government and corporations start making you, folks? You hybrid chimera. What are the rules on that? They're already giving baboons rights. They're always giving robots rights. What about, why aren't yours, you men and women, why aren't yours being recognized? Thank you for tuning in today. I hope something I said pushes you over the edge into action. Crawl underneath that snowberg, the land-based iceberg. Thank you, Grimner, for your help and your website and getting it all, keeping it there for 199 episodes of Behind the Woodshed. And Bo Diddy and you and Freedom's Network, social network, folks, freedomsnetwork.com. Sign up, check it, whether you can be a conversation going on there. I hope you can use it as a tool. It can be to pull all this stuff together. Work in teams on taking down. You have a special interest and a special skill. Come pull yourself in teams of 3 and 4 or 5 people, whatever it takes. Go after something. Jules, UCY, thank you again for simulcasting every Sunday and then rebroadcasting again as an original time on Thursday. And then your YouTube account that you have and RLM has, and terrestrial broadcasters, thank you very much for your help to the Luddites that have actual radio. those airwaves aren't yet so controlled that we can't get out of that. And Gary Mary, thank you for the Spreaker. And again, iHeart, I guess we're on iHeart. .com for those of you in iTunes and all kinds of places. We're everywhere. Just you need to help me to send out the broadcast to tell